Good morning. Daf Kuf Vav Amud Bet, 146b by the Mishnah near the bottom. Notnin tavshilu toch habor b'shir shehei shamur. You're allowed to place a cooked dish inside a pit that was a cool area so that it should be protected there and shouldn't get too hot. It was too hot outside, so it would spoil. So they put it there, that was the refrigeration. You may place good waters, like you have some good water here, you place it inside bera'im, in bad waters, but they were cold. So you place the container of good water inside the cold water, so that they become cold. What is the chidush of that? What is the chidush of the Mishnah? The Gemara is going to ask. Why would it be a problem? Why would I think it's a problem? What am I doing? The opposite is also okay, to put cold water in the sun so it warms up. The chiddush over there is that toldat from the or, the sun itself, not the toldat or, is not a problem. It's not an isser of Shabbat. Fine. Someone whose clothing fell into the water while they were walking. It's not necessarily falling, but even if it got rained on, he can walk with them. And he doesn't have to worry that he might come to squeeze them. Squeezing wet clothing is a tolda of milaben, because it's part of the process of washing, of cleaning clothing. So the Mishnah teaches us that even though you're not allowed to wash, right, a beged that's wet on Shabbat, you're not allowed to not only wash, you're not allowed to wear a wet beged. If you have a wet beged, you're not allowed to put it on because you might come to squeeze it. But here that you're already wearing it, the Chachamim did not make you take it off because for kavod abriot. Meaning he has no other clothing to wear, and therefore if he has to take these off, it will not be kavod abriot. Otherwise, if he has other ones, of course he has to take them off. So now he gets to the city. If he reaches the outside chatzer, which means the first place that he's able to protect his clothing, because there's a enclosed area, then shotcham bechama, he spreads them out so that they dry up in the sun. Avalo keneged ha'am, but not in front of the people, because that's marit ayin. Which means that's where people would dry their things up. In front of other people, people might think that he washed them today. Because if he washed them yesterday, he should have put them up yesterday. So it's ma'at ha'ayin. So as long as people are not around, you could do it. But if people are not around, you can't do it because of ma'at ha'ayin. The halacha doesn't follow this exactly. The halacha is always ma'at ha'ayin. It's asur even b'cheder chadar. As long as if people will be around, there will be a problem. So I can't do it at all. Okay, says the Gemara Akdosha. Pshita, says the Gemara. Why would the Mishnah have to tell you the first two halachot? You're allowed to put a cooked dish or water into other waters that are cold to keep them cool. You can't put things in a refrigerator. What's the problem? What's the issue? You would think that a person might come to smooth out the bottom of the bar, and by doing that, he will smooth out all the holes so that the pot of food sits comfortably That would be Isser of Choresh or Boneh Kamash Malon, that they weren't gozer. In the second case, let her put cold waters in bad pshita, says the Gemara, same question. That one you can't tell me. Ashvei Gumot, because you're putting it into water. So the Gemara says, Sefer it's tzrichale. Betatzonem b'chama. The reason why I wanted to tell it to us is, since it had to say the opposite case, you have to put cold water into the sun, it already just taught us the first halacha that you're allowed to put water, cold water, into cold water. Just the opposite case, you want to make it cool. But it wasn't, there's no chidush. The only chidush is the last case that you're allowed to place water to warm it up in the sun. It says the Gemara, what's the chidush in that? Hanami pshita. I would think that it's asur to do such a thing, because you can end up insulating it in hot ashes. You'll be over on the Isser of Bishul. Kamash Malon, they weren't geyser. They weren't worried about it. Says the Gemara, Misha Noshru. The Mishnah said anybody whose clothing got wet, they let him wear it, and they let him, and they take it. He takes it off, not in front of the people. And the reason for that is because if you don't make cheder chadarim asur, even in the inside of rooms, within rooms, it's going to be asur. Then he'll end up doing it even in public and say, "Oh, there's nobody around. I don't see anybody around." And there might be people around that he doesn't notice. Once you allow him to do it, he might do it in a way that will be problematic. People will notice. Or another way of saying it is, he might think that he's within a room, within another room, but there might be someone there that he didn't realize, so therefore they just said asur. Okay, so says the Gemara, so you see clearly only in front of the people, but if no one's around, you could do it. So the Gemara says, Tanoihi, it's really machlok. Tanoihi, the Tanya shotcha mechama v'lo kenegedam. Rabbi Loza Rabbi Shimon Osrin, they say it's asur, because just like Rav said, like if you understand the name of Rav, that Rabbi Loza and Rabbi Shimon also say that it's asur in any place. And that's what most poskim paskin, that's what we pass in the halacha. Omar Rav Huna. Rav Huna says, Hamena'er talito b'Shabbat. If someone shakes out his talit on Shabbat, chayav chatat. He's chayav chatat because he's being over on the Isser of milaben. That is whitening it. That's part of the whitening process. Tosfot and other Rishonim, they want to say that getting rid of the dust and all the things, that's not milaben, because in order to be over on milaben, you need wet, you need water. And what it's talking about is that you're trying to shake off the dew that fell on it. So that would make it nicer. The dew went into it and then you shake it off, so it makes it whiter, but anything that's not absorbed with wetness inside, that you're allowed to remove on Shabbat. Now Rashi also agrees that if your stain on your thing is like mud, if it has a mud stain, Rashi himself said elsewhere that taking it off, the mud, without water is not libun. Why? Over here he says even shaking off any dust is libun. The answer is over there, it's not going to come off the stain. You take your nail, the outside stuff will come off. But since there's mud inside, you need water. So there Rashi is mud there. But here if you just have dust and things like that, that's already, according to Rashi, that's already a problem of milaben. So Says the Gemara, "V'lo amrin el b'chadati." That's only new clothing. Some say new clothing is that it was never washed yet. Avo be'atiki, but old let lamba. V'lo amrin el b'uchmi. Why? Why is that not an issue? You're allowed to shake it off because people don't care that much about it. So a new one that we care so much, so that keeps its brightness and its whiteness. So that's the Isser. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter to the person, and that's not the normal derech. Only by black clothing. But white and red, let lamba. Because black clothing becomes ruined. It's black, sharp, it's dark black, gets ruined with the dust. But white and red, no problem. Buhu, and that's only the kapid alayu. That the baalim, the owner, is always very, very clean and very particular not to wear it when it's dusty. But if he doesn't care about it usually, and sometimes he wears it without shaking it down, then the chatchila, you're allowed to shake it off on Shabbat. It's not even Isser de Rabbanan. So the Gemara says, Ula ikla pumpedita, Ula visited pumpedita, Chazer Rabbanan de Kamenapsig Limayu. He saw the Chachamim in that city, they were shaking off the talit. Omar kam chalin Rabbanan Shabsa. The Rabbanan over here, Mechalel Shabbat. He was not fond. Amar Lahu Rav Yehuda, Nefutzele be'ape. Okay. Anan lo yikaptinan mini. Don't worry about it. You could shake it off right in front of him. Because we're not particular about this. So therefore, if someone really wants to do it, it's not a problem. We don't view it as real. That's not the part of the cleaning process. Yeah, so why were they busy doing it? They were doing it for Kavod Shabbat. They wanted to look their best. But they don't usually care. Abaye was standing once on Shabbat before his Rebbe Rabbi Yosef. Amar le, Rabbi Yosef told him, Havli kumtai. Please bring him a hat. He saw there was a little bit of dew on top of it. He wasn't sure if to give it to him. So for Rabbi Yosef said, "Nefut shtei, shake it off. Hanam lekabdinan mini. We're not particular about this. We wear it even with the dew on it, and therefore we're allowed to shake it off." That was Abaye's question. Abaye's question was, is my Rebbe very particular or not? If he's very particular, I should clean it off because I'm allowed to clean it off before I give it to him. So really, it all depends on the person that owns the article of clothing. Yeah. Okay, so the Gemara is like this. If someone goes out on Shabbat and the talit in those days would cover most of their body. They wrapped their whole body, that was the outer cloak, the beged elyon. But if someone decides, for whatever reason, that he wants to fold it up, so it shouldn't get dirty, so he's not wearing it in the normal fashion, so he's chayav chatat, because that's not the way of malbush, that is a masa. Okay? Unless he does that in the weekday, like that. But if he doesn't usually do that in the weekday, that's not the way that he wears it, and therefore now, all those extra folds he's carrying. Tanya Nami Hachi, Sochek Tzim Betalitot Mikupalot Munachot Al Kteifam B'Shabbat. Those people who do business with clothing go out on Shabbat, go out to Rishut Rabim with talitot that are folded and placed on their shoulders on Shabbat. Chayvin Chatat. Not only for those who sell them, they pick them because that's the people that used to do that. Because they were carrying them to be able to sell them, not to wear them. Ready? Okay. A store owner who would go out to Rishut Rabim with money that were wrapped in his sadin, chayav chatat. Now, obviously, it's derech maser, not malbush, right? But you might, right? Obviously, you're not wearing your money. If your money is inside some sort of sadin, some sort of sheet, obviously you're carrying. Why would I think that money is part of my clothing? The chiddush is that I would have thought that carrying money in such a fashion is abnormal. To put it into a sadin and carry it. So therefore I'm not going to be chayav chatat because I'm carrying in a way that's not normal. It's not kederech. So the Mishnah says, no. Because there are some people that carry their money that way. Who's that? The store owners. So they make it kind of normal already. So that's why the Braita ends, V'lo chen v'ni b'levad amru, ela kol adam, anybody, ela shedarka shechem v'ni latzet kach. Right? The reason why they picked Chemani because it's normal for him. So we're giving him as an example, but now everybody else is also going to be chayav. V'haratanin yotzin, the people from Ratan, they're allowed to walk out b'sudarin shel ktefan, with handkerchiefs that are folded on their shoulders. V'lo ratanin b'vad amru, ela kol adam. It's not only, they had very large handkerchiefs in those days, and they were able to cover their head and their body. Most of their body was like big handkerchiefs. But since the Ratanin people would carry them folded on their shoulders, that's the way they wore them every day. So now it becomes part of your dress, and now everybody else also, it's okay for people to do that. So here's the difference between the sudar and the talit. The talit wasn't normally worn that way. It was normally worn normal. So if you want to, let's say, make sure it doesn't get dirty, for whatever reason you fold it up onto your shoulders, that's a problem. But here, as we see the Ratanin and other people as well, would wear their handkerchiefs in a different way. They would have it always folded, and therefore it's not a problem of carrying. And that's those are our, by the way, our talit, what? Our talitot, what'd you say? Our talitot, right? We wear them like this, so that's not a problem on Shabbat. That's why you're walking in a place that doesn't have an eruv. Because that's the way we wear our talit. That is the normal way. That's folded. That is the dress. So therefore, it's not going to be carried. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, ma'aseh b'hurkanis b'noi shel Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanis, sheyotza b'suda shel kseifa b'Shabbos, ela shenimo ukruch lebed tzva'o. Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanis had a child named after his father, named Hurkanis. He went out in Rishut Rabim with this handkerchief folded on his shoulder. Ela shenimo kruch loi be'etzboi. But he had one thread coming out, wrapped around his finger, to make sure that it doesn't fall off his shoulder. And the Chacham said, even if it was not wrapped around his finger, so it shouldn't fall, it's still going to be okay. He was being extra careful to make sure that he doesn't come to pick something up from Rishut Rabim and carry it so that it shouldn't fall off his shoulder, so he had it wrapped around his finger. It's going to be mutar. Visited the Beit Midrash of Asi Bar Hini Bo Minei. The Talmidim in the Beit Midrash asked him, Ma olasot mazev b'Shabbat? Are you allowed to make the form of a marzev? How do you say marzev in English? Oh. The spout, thank you. On Shabbat with your talit. What does that mean? We'll see in a second. Amalahu hachi omerab el ai hasru la'asot mazev b'Shabbat. Rabbi said you're not allowed to make the form of a spout with your talit on Shabbat because it's tikkun keli. My mazev omerab zeira kisei bavliyata. Bavli pockets. What would they do? The Bablim, they would fold the talitot like pockets, like a spout. And since their clothing was very long, they would fold the bottom upwards, and they would hold up the folds with these threads. And what happened was these folds, they were formed like a pocket or like a spout. And so that's tikkun keli basically. That's makeh patish. So Rabbi Yirmi Haviyativ Kamed Rabbi Zeira. Rabbi Yirmi was sitting before Rabbi Zeira on a weekday. Rabbi Yirmi then folded his talit in a specific form. Amalei hochimai. Then he told Reb Zeira, what would you say, doing what I'm doing now, on this weekday, what would you say, is this the marzev that they said it's asur to do on Shabbat? Om alei asur. So he said, that's the problem, yeah. Then he did another one, and he said, V'hochi man, what about this way? Om alei asur, it's a problem. Take this rule always in your hand. Any form that you make in the talit, what you have in mind is that you'd like to make this form forever, asur. You want it to be gathered this way and stay this way, that's asur. But kol dilit naot, but any form that you're just doing to look good for right now, but it's not going to stay that way, shari. Because you're not really forming anything, you're not being mitakin the keli. Like the story of Rav Shisha B'rei Davidi, mitna'e b'stino hava. Every day after he put on his sadin, he would make it look good through different types of folds. But he did that daily. So that means that he didn't do it every single day. So he wasn't being mitake in the keli. It was a daily look that he did to the cloth, to the talit. And therefore, you're allowed to do it even on Shabbat. There's a different way of learning this sugya we learned it the way Rashi learns. Other Rishonim learned this sugya of making the Isser of Marzev is because you're making folds. And if you make folds, it's going to be a problem like the sugya that we learned right before of carrying on Shabbat. And what the Gemara meant the whole time was, if you fold them up in order to protect them from getting dirty, that's asur. But if you're doing it for beauty, so that's part of the derech malbush, and therefore it's not carrying. It's like a whole different sugi according to the other Rishonim. It's not about when is it a tikkun keli, when it's not a tikkun keli. Okay, Kiyata Rav Dimi, Omar. When Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he said, Pamachat yatzar Rabbi l'sadeh v'hayu shnei tzidei talito u'manachin al ktefo. Both sides of his talit were folded and placed on his shoulder. Okay? Now, this is different than what we said before, when you fold up the back of the talit over yourself. Because that's not the derech malbush. But this is the derech malbush, and this is the way we do it ourselves, the way what Rebbe did. Amar the fun of Yeshua ben Zeruz, ben Chamiv shel Rebbe Meir. Yeshua, the son of Zeruz, who is the son of Chamiv shel Rebbe Meir, the father of Rebbe Meir, said, Bizu lo chiyev Rebbe Meir chatat. In this type of wearing, didn't Rabbi Meir say Yechayav Chatat? That's not Derech Malbush. Omalei, so Rabbi told him, Diktek Rabbi Meir ad kan. Rabbi Meir was so careful. It doesn't make sense. Meaning he said back to him, he asked him, Rabbi Meir didn't do this, so he said back to him, Diktek Rabbi Meir ad kan. He says, it can't be that Rabbi Meir was makbid so much so till this point. He was only makbid if you take the back of the talit. But I didn't touch the back of the talit. The back of the talit is still covering most of my body. It's only the sides of the talit that I put on, and that's the normal way of wearing it. But still, since Yeshua ben Zeruz told him, Shilshel Rabbi Talito, Rabbi let his talit go all the way down to the floor, and fine. Kiyata Ravin. When Ravin came from Eitzel, this is not Rav Dimi, he had a different recording. He said, Lo Yeshua ben Zerus Hava. It wasn't Yeshua ben Zerus. El Yeshua ben Ksufai, ben Kfusai Haya. Chatno shel Rabbi Akiva. When it says Chatno, what does it mean? It means the son-in-law of Rabbi Akiva. And he didn't say it over in the name of Rabbi Meir, but Omar Bizulechi Rabbi Akiva Chatat. Didn't Rabbi Akiva say Chatat? Amalo Diktek Rabbi Akiva Atkan, then Shosher Rabbi Talito. So it's a different recording. Ki Atar Shmuel ben Rabbi Yehuda Omar Nishal Itmar. The story never happened with Rebbe himself. The story was asked of Rebbe. And Rebbe said it's okay, and then you had Yeshua ben Kfusai or Yeshua ben Zeruz that came and told him. Oh yo 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 yo, oh yo yo, oh yo yo. Okay. So now the Mishnah the new Mishnah Kedosha deals with the isurim of washing your body and drying your body on Shabbat. Harochetz b'mei me'ara. If someone washes himself in hot waters inside a cave, which means there's an issue that Rabbanan to go into hot waters, but the guy went in. Ubemei Tveria, or in the waters of the springs, the hot springs of Tveria, v'nistapeg, and he dried himself afilu be'eser alun tiot, even with 10 towels, one on top of the other. Lo yiviem biyado, he shouldn't carry them home in his hand, even though he used 10 of them. So each one is very, very very not wet. Still, Chazal were worried that a person might come to squeeze them out when he gets home. Asara b'nei adam mistapkim ba'alun titachat. But 10 people can dry themselves with one towel, pneim yideim v'ragleim u'mevi'in otam b'yadon. Even though the towel is extremely wet because 10 people used it. But if they're all walking together, each one will remind each other not to squeeze it. So therefore, they had no problem of bringing it back home, even though it was extremely wet. So basically, even if it's very not wet, if it's only one person, we're worried that he might squeeze it out. But if there's 10 people, they'll remind each other. Da da da. Now, why isn't there an issur over here, Rabotai, of what? Of washing. Why only of schita? What about kibbutz? So there should be a problem of drying yourself because you're going to be washing the towel that way. So the Rishonim say like this. First of all, there's only washing on a dirty thing. This is a clean towel. Second of all, even if you say that there is a problem of kibbutz on a clean towel, they're moda here that you're allowed to dry with it on Shabbat because it's only a problem of kibbutz if you're trying to clean it. But now you're doing the opposite. You're trying to make it dirty. You have dirty waters, so you're putting the waters into the towel. The towel is becoming wet. It's getting dirty. Okay. But there are Rishonim that say that with a lot of water, be very careful not to use even a clean towel. Even if it's going to become dirty, the towel, thereby. And even if the towel was clean before. Meaning, it's a problem. So there are Rishonim that say that if you wash your hands, it's a minhag kasher. It's a proper minhag. To try to, not to have a lot of mayim merubim on it. Because it's close to kibbutz. The Ramah over there is more lenient about it. And you'll have to say, according to him, that this Mishnah is talking about, since each part of the towel is not really, it's a large towel, it's not a small hand towel. So every part is just taking a small part of the wetness on his body. Therefore, it's not mayim merubim. Okay, so that is what the Mishnah is saying. Just 1 second. Okay, so now going into the made tveria, that's going to be mutar. The Chacham at the end made it mutar, but being rochetz in the made ma'ara is going to be an isur d'Rabbanan. But the point is that he already did it, and now the Chacham made an isur for him to take it after it was wet, because you might come to squeeze it out. But if there's a lot of people there, then they allowed it. Says the Mishnah, "Sachinu mimashmishin avalo mit amlin." A person is allowed to anoint himself with oil and move his hand around his entire body. He doesn't have to just put it on. He can move it around his whole body. Okay. I want to give himself a massage. Avalomit amlin. But you're not allowed to really work the body too hard, like exercise. And you have to do it very softly. Velomit got it in. And you can't move around the flesh with like a rake, like a comb that was made for that. That's like an uvda dechoil, and they made it asur. Doing too much exercise, what's the problem? Either uvda dechoil or Some say that if you sweat too much, that's already a refuah, and that's under the problem of doing refuah on Shabbat. Ein yodin likudima, ve'en osin apiktivizin. Remember we had that before? You're not allowed to go down into the river called Kudima. It was a river in Eretz Yisrael. The Gemara is going to say the problem. Ve'en osin apiktivizin. You're not allowed to make that concoction that helps a person vomit. We spoke about that before. Apek, tepei, and zin. Apek means to take out the tfei, the extras, and the zin, the mazon. You're not allowed to do that because that's like refuah. So you're not allowed to make this. Ve'ein me'atzvin et hakatan. You're not allowed to shape the bones of the little child. We had a machloket about this before. Remember Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshet, I think. So what's going on? This Mishnah clearly says that you're allowed to do it. So the problem is you're not allowed to do it because it looks like boneh. Because you're making this baby's, you're like building up the baby's body. And the Chacham said, you're not allowed to do such a thing. But if it's on the day that he was born, you're allowed to do everything the baby needs. You're not allowed to put back a dislocated bone on Shabbat, because again, it looks like boneh. We'll see soon that the Gemara is going to say that the halacha doesn't follow this Mishnah. You're allowed to put back a dislocated bone. This is all, of course, talking about everything here. There's no pikuach nefashot. If someone has a bone that was dislocated, you're not allowed to rub it in cold water. We can wash it normally. If it gets healed, it heals. What's the problem? Because if you wash it with a lot of cold water, it's clear that you're doing something for refuah, and it's asur. But if you just wash it normally, and you mean to heal it, as long as it doesn't look out of the ordinary, that's going to be mutar. Says the Gemara, Katoni mei me'ora dumyo de mei tveria. Ma mei tveria chamin af mei me'ora chamin. Now, both cases in the Mishnah, one is the cave, one is the mei tveria. Just like the mei tveria is hot, so that means the mei me'ora is also hot. And that's why the Tanah said, harochet diavad, if someone washed himself and then dried himself. Which means, then you could start figuring out, yes, what to do with the towel. But lechatchila no. But that's why I didn't say a person may go and wash himself. It says if he did. Because really there's an isur to go into hot water that was gathered. Says the Gemara, Michlal. From here you can refer, the lishtatif kol gufoy afilu lechatchila shapidami. The Mishnah is mashma. Is what? That only to go into the water is a problem. You could have just said, why would I have to say this whole din over here? Why would I have to say that if someone washed himself in a mei me'ora, and how did it say it? It says in a b'di'evid fashion. If you did, then what to do with the towel, etc. Why didn't it just say if someone washed himself? Don't give me any examples about where he did it. If a guy washes himself, done. It's not a gay, where. The point is he's wet, and he wants to use the towel, and we're worried about the towel being squeezed out because of an isser of libun on the towel. So if there's 10 people, it's not a problem. If there's one, it's a problem. Why do you have to mention where? So the teretz is that that's teaching you that only washing is the problem in the mei me'ora. But rinsing yourself in hot water is not a problem. right? If you pour hot water on your, but you don't go into them, you don't immerse yourself, it sounds like it's mutar. So the Gemara says, Mani, who's the shita? Rabbi Shimoni. Titanya lo yishtatif odom be'mecham be'mitzoyin div Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir is very machmir. He says you're not allowed to even rinse in hot water. Rabbi Shimon matir, and Rabbi Shimon says to rinse, you pour hot water. That was heated erev Shabbat. That's for sure not a problem, even with hot water. For sure with cold. Rabbi Yehuda omer bechamin asu b'tzanen mutar. And Rabbi Yehuda says bechamin I go like Rabbi Shimon. Tzonen I say it's mutar. Rabbi Shimon was Rabbi Meir was, Rabbi Yehuda says, Bechamin Asur, sorry, like Rabbi Meir. Betzonen Mutar, like Rabbi Shimon. So Rabbi Meir was very machmir. He was machmir even on cold. Because they made a gzeira on Merchatzot, not only to go in, but even to wash, and even to wash with cold, because if you wash with cold, you end up washing with hot, you end up immersing. And then you'll end up what? Heating it up. And therefore, so the question was, how far did they go in the Gzeir? Now we go back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, so the Meister, the halacha follows who? Rabbi Yehuda. Because Rabbi Yehuda always, we go follow him over Rabbi Meir. And here there's Rabbi Shimon's Shita also, but Rabbi Yehuda is the in-between Shita. And all the way back on Pesach, we had the Sugya, Rabbi Yochanan Paskin like the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda. So we Paskin like Rabbi Yehuda that Bechamin it's going to be Asur and Bitzonen it's going to be Mutar. So it would come out from this halacha, if you follow Rabbi Yehuda in halacha, and that's the halacha l'maaseh, that you're allowed to take a cold shower on Shabbat. So why don't we take cold showers on Shabbat? The answer is that it's a minhag kodum. It's an early minhag brought down in the Trumat Hadeshin that we don't wash ourselves on Shabbat or Yom Tov, even with cold. We don't go into a cold river, nothing. Now, to get your tumah off, to go into a mikveh, that you could go into a cold mikveh. Now, what about to get the tumah off in a hot mikveh, which should be an Isser? That is a million different shittas about do what your shita is. The Chassidish Paiskim, they go mutter, and Moshe Feinstein holds it's aser. The literature people follow it, it's a problem. And whatever, a person has to be careful. A person has to be careful because there's a strong yetzer hara to just want to go in because it's holy. But a person has to know that he has to have a real psak of his rabbi, his rav, that it's mutter, because if not, then it's not holy. It's not holy. What's really holy is to keep Shabbat. If you really want tahara on your body, it's Shabbat. You keep Shabbat, you get tahara. You go after Shabbat. Okay, anyways. So what was the difference between the Reish and the Sefer? The difference was, if you're alone, then we're worried you're going to use the towel and squeeze it out. But 10 people, they're going to remind each other. It doesn't really matter how many towels you use. So the Gemara wants to say like this. In the ratio, it says, it said, if you dry yourself even with 10 towels, don't bring them home, because you might squeeze them out. But 10 people can use one towel. So why did you say 10 in the ratio? And in the Sefer you said 1. So ratio revuta kamashul and the Sefer revuta kamashul. Each one is teaching you a chidush. Ratio revuta kamashul on dafilu hanidulin fishabu mayo. Even if you're using 10 towels and each one doesn't have a lot of water in it, kivan dechadu, since there's only one person, the Chachamim were worried. Atil day schita, he's going to come to schita. The Sefer that's talking about 10 people, they used one towel. Revuta kamashul is teaching you a chidush. Dafilu hanidulin fishabu mayo. Even though it's going to be so wet, because the magevet here is very, very soaked now, because they used one towel for 10 people. They're going to remind each other, they're watching each other. Tanu Rabbanan mistapeg adam me'aluntit umenicha bechalon. You see in this Braita, the Braita says a person is allowed to dry himself with a towel on Shabbat, Yom Tov, and he places it on the window. He should not bring it home, because he might forget and squeeze it out. And he can't give it to the mikveh people, to the bathhouse people that would heat up the bathhouse, because they were actually suspected, they were Amei Ha'aretz, and they would be Mechal Shabbos, anything to do with the needs of their little baby, their little bathhouse. That's what they did, they would do. So therefore you can't give them your wet towels on Shabbat, because they might dry them out by squeezing them so that they can now reuse them and give them to another person. So therefore you can't give it to them. Rabbi Shimon argues with everything we've been saying now. He says, you could use it and take it home. And obviously there's no Isser Hotzah, you have an Eruv where you're going through the Chatzirot, whatever it is. But this is the halacha, by the way, not like our Mishnah, not like Rabbi Shimon in this Braita. And that's why we, if a person gets wet, he could use a towel. Let's say he goes to the mikveh, a cold mikveh on Shabbat, or he has a psak, whatever it is. Whatever mikveh he goes to, he's allowed to go, then we use towels. And if you carry, you can take it home. What's the halacha? We have all the Amoraim and the Tanoim over here that hold that you're allowed to do it. Reb Shimon, Rebbe, and Shmuel, and Rabbi Yochanan. So that's the halacha. You're allowed to do it. Where do we find all these people? Rabbi Shimon had the Amr. Rabbi Shimon, we already said where. We just said Rabbi Shimon. And Rebbe, the Tanya, Amr Rebbe, Kishayunu Lemedim Torah, Etz Rabbi Shimon B'Tzkoya. When we learned Torah by Rabbi Shimon in Tekoa, and we wanted to wash on Shabbat in the river there, Hayinu Ma'alin Shemen, we would bring up oil, va'aluntit, and a towel, mechatzel legag u'migag lekarpef, from the chotzer to the gag, and from the gag to the karpef, because this was, according to Reb Shimon, this was allowed to be, you're allowed to carry from gag lekarpef, until we were able to bring it all the way to the spring that we were, and they would bring it back home that way. So you see that Rebbe did like his Rebbe Shimon. Shmuel, where do we find that? The Amr Rabbi Yehuda Amr Shmuel, mistapeg adam ba'aluntit, u'mevir biyado l'seich beisoy. Straight out. Rabbi Yochanan the Amr Rabbi Chia Barabba Amr Rabbi Yochanan halacha mistapeg adam ba'aluntit u'mevi'ah biyado l'toch beito. Same thing. U'mi Amr Rabbi Yochanan hachi. No, Amr Rabbi Yochanan halacha kistam Mishnah. Rabbi Yochanan always says that halacha like kistam Mishnah, and our Mishnah says u'tnan nistapeg afilu b'yes aluntiot. Lo yiviem biyado. It says you're not allowed to, even if you have 10 towels, and each one is very, very kind of dry, just a drop wet, you're still not allowed to bring it. So our Mishnah seems to say not like Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Yochanan always goes like a stam Mishnah. So the Gemara answers, Ahu keben chachinai masni lo. Rabbi Yochanan actually said that our Mishnah is not a stam Mishnah. Our Mishnah is specifically ben chachinai, and that's why it's not a stam Mishnah. Shabbat shalom. The balanim, those who take care of the merchat, are allowed to bring on Shabbat to the bathhouse through the Reshut Rabim towels that the ladies would use, uvad she yitkaseh bahen rosham ruban, as long as they wore them. So it was derech malbush, and they were not carrying. Okay. So the Gemara says schanita, a very large handkerchief, which was usually wrapped around his head and hung over his shoulders. You have to tie both bottoms, ends, together so it doesn't fall off. So what does that mean on the bottom? Beneath the shoulders. So it doesn't fall off. Rava told the people of Mechuzah, Ki ma'avritu mani livnei chela, shabivu behu lemata miktefayim. When you want to bring your clothing livnei chela to the soldiers, to the Rishut Rabim, always shabivu behu lemata miktefayim. Let the begodim hang lower than your shoulders, so it should be considered derech malbush. Now the Mishnah says sochichin, you're allowed to smear, umimashushin, and you're allowed to move around your hand for hana'ah. Tanura banan, over your body. Sachinu umimashushin v'vnei ayim b'Shabbat. You're allowed to smear and move your hand across the stomach of a person that had an issue, and there's no issue of refuah. As long as he doesn't do it in the way that he did it, does it in the weekday, because then it looks like uvda the chayil. Why is it not refuah? Because even healthy people would go and do these types of things. A person that didn't have a stomach virus or any issues would also do it. Rabbi Chama bar Chanina Omer stoch ve'ach kach memashmish. Rabbi Yochanan Omer stoch memashmish v'as achas. Rabbi Chama says that it was normal in the weekday to first, give him a massage and then to do that. Therefore, you have to change around the order. But Rabbi Yochanan holds, no, that in the weekday there was no specific order. Therefore, you can do it however you want. Therefore, in order to show that it's different than the weekday, you have to do them at the same time. Otherwise, whatever order you choose is too much of an uvda d'chayil. Avalom it amni, but you're not allowed to do exercise. Only in a very weak way. Now we said that the isser to exercise. What's the isser to exercise? Either uvda d'chayil or sweating for refuah. Very good. So the Gemara says, you're not allowed to stand on the floor of the river of Diyomset. Now, it was a very salty river. They say it's near the city of Amos in the Yehuda region. So the bottom of the river would make you hot, and through that salty, sulfur, muddy bottom, sounds like by the Yam HaMelech they have this stuff. So he would get healed. So it's like a refuah on Shabbat. Okay. All the days of healing of the Diyom Set is 21 days. And Shavuot is part of the count. Which means those 21 days, including Shavuot, they're very auspicious times for refuah from there. So the Gemara says, Ibayulu atzeret lahagisa lahagisa. Is Shavuot, on which side of the coin is it? Meaning, is it the first day of the 21 days or the last day of the 21 days? Tosh Shemal, let's bring a proof. The Omer Shmuel Kulu Shakyone Midivcha ve'adatzata me'alu. All the drinks of refuah from Pesach. Pesach is called divcha. Divcha is zivcha. Zivcha is zevach. The carbon. Until Shavuot. So Shavuot is the end time. Okay? In the spring days. So the Gemara says, right, during the Iyar over there. Iyar is Ani Hashem Rofecha. Right? So the Gemara says, so you see clearly that Atzarta is the last day. So the Gemara says, no, Dilma Hatam, who dekamid dekar alma me'ali. Aval hacha, there you're talking about drinking. So drinking is in the springtime. Because as long as it's cold out there, it's good. The drinks work better. Aval hacha, we're not talking about drinking here. Here we're talking about getting warmed up from the bottom of the river. Mishum havlahu. It's because of the hevel, the hot air inside the chum. So the came of the chum almost fame alis. Just the opposite. The hotter it is outside, the better. Omer Rabbi Chelbei. So now, by the way, at the end of the surah, you would think that it's only from Shavuot and on. But in the Rambam it says that it's also the whole year. What's the pshat in the Rambam? Either because he holds that that's just the main time of the year that's going to be beneficial, but the whole year it works. Okay, Omer Rabbi Chelbei, Chamro de Frugi. Chamro de Frugita umaya de Diomeset. The wine of Frugita. It's a very, very special wine. And the water of Diomeset. Kipchu aseret hashatim Yisrael. They basically, Kipchu means they hoarded. And it ruined the 10 Shvatim of Klal Yisrael. Because since they were very finicky and they were busy with this, they didn't learn enough Torah, and therefore they went off. Now, we know that Ashur, the king of Ashur, he exiled the 10 Shvatim, and they were gone from Klal Yisrael. Now, the Gemara in Sanhedrin says that according to Rebbe Kiva, they're never coming back. At least according to Rashi there. So here the Gemara says what the problem was. Okay, the Maisa, let's go drop weiter. Avaloi. Let's just drop to the end of the two dots. Rabbi Loza ben Aroch Ikal Hossam. He was invited to Prugita and Dumeset Imshich Batrayu, and he went after these pleasures. Iaka Talmudei, and he forgot his Torah. And the Gemara, the Medresh in Kohelet, he brings down this story a little bit longer, but let's just finish the story here. Ki Hadar Ata, when he came back, Kom Lemikra B'Sifra. He wanted to read the Sefer Torah, Bo Lemikra. He wanted to read the pasuk that says HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem Rosh Chodashim, and he said HaCheresh Hoya Libam. He mixed up the Chodesh, the Dalid in Chodesh, he made it to a Resh, and the Chaf in Lachem, he read Libam. So they realized that he forgot everything. Bo Rabban Rachmei. So the Chacham prayed for him, V'hod Talmudei. And his Talmud came back. Rabbi Lotan Barach was one of the 5 great Talmidim of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai at the end of the second Beit HaMikdash. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was nifter. They went to Yavne, right? But Rabbi Lotan Barach didn't go after them. He stayed in Amos, his wife's city, near these beautiful waters. And he was waiting for his friends to come there. They didn't come. He wanted to go, but his wife, she said, it's not proper that you should go after. They have to come after you. At the end of the day, he stayed over there, and they went there to Yavne, and he started forgetting his Talmud. Okay? So anyways, what does Acheresh HaYolim mean? And the problem was Acheresh HaYolibam. Hacheresh, he became like deaf to understand Torah. His heart, that was usually a mayan hamitkaber, became like a cheresh. V'hainu detan Rabbi Naroi Oimer. Rabbi Naroi says, "Have a goyim koyim Torah. You should exile yourself to a place of Torah. V'al tomar shehitavu acherecha. Don't think it's going to come running after you. Go after your friends. Don't say, oh, they're my talmidim, so I'll just stay here and they'll come after me." Okay? Because only your friends that live in a Makam Torah will be able to sustain your Torah. And don't rely on your great wisdom. Tana loy Rabbi Neroy Shmoi el Rabbi Nechemi Shmoi. Wasn't really, his name is not really Rabbi Neroy, his name is Rabbi Nechemi, va'amri Rabbi Elazar ben Aroch Shmoi. And some say it's Rabbi Elazar ben Aroch. Because he illuminated the eyes of the Chachamim b'halacha. Meaning it was Rabbi Elazar ben Aroch himself that illuminated them. The Gemara is teaching us that we always have to talk Torah with others. Not to stay alone, because then you'll start forgetting things. You have to sharpen your mind by talking with other Chazak Baruch.